A lot of people try to find their mission in life, and I have just discovered mine. It is to stop the most disrespectful attempt of your opponents, to defeat you using the scholar's checkmate, also known as the fool's checkmate. It is when they start off with the move pawn e4, and after pawn e5 they bring out their queen and the bishop in one way or the other. Let's say bishop c4, knight c6, and now they want to bring their queen out and to checkmate you that way. Now, in this case, it seems that only complete beginners would ever try this little trick against you. But the reality is completely different, and it blows my mind. There are almost 10 million people who tried this scholar's checkmate as white in this position, and in fact it is the second most played move by white here. What the heck is going on? We gotta stop that, and we gotta be merciless. Here's what I suggest. Once your opponent plays the queen out, either to f3 or h5, it doesn't matter, we'll color both, you'll use the same way against both of them. Let's start with queen to f3, because that's the most popular way for white. And here I recommend that you play the move queen f6, and it's a lot trickier than it seems at first. In fact, I recorded some time ago a video on how to counter the early queen attack. It got over 1 million views, and you guys loved it a lot. But what I've also noticed is that the top comment actually suggests that a guy enjoyed the variations a lot and had to practice them for 2 hours in order to memorize how to counter that. And I respect the effort, but that's just a little bit too much. So I wanted to give you the simplest solution possible, which at the same time is brutal enough to discourage your opponents from ever trying this trick against you. So what's the thing with queen to f6? Well, first of all, you physically block this queen takes f7 threat. Secondly, you bait them into capturing your queen, which they do in most cases, and that is wrong. If you're a part of the Igor Nation, you know that to take is a mistake, but they don't know it. So they capture on f6, which helps you to develop your knight with a tempo, and now you attack this pawn. So that's the first little thing that somehow they overlook, because the most played move by white here is knight to f3, which just loses this pawn on e4, and now when queens came off the board, white has no attack whatsoever, you can grab the pawn, enjoy an extra pawn on endgame, you have an advantage here. Now, what if they don't blunder this pawn? In this case, they'll need to defend it somehow. Let's say they go d3 or knight c3, doesn't matter. But their problems don't stop here, because you follow up with knight to d4. And you use the fact that there is no queen on d1, and therefore this pawn on c2 is no longer defended. Therefore, by jumping with your knight forward to d4, you're threatening to capture this pawn, which will create this fork to their king and rook, and you'll win the game that way. Now, in this position, lots of your opponents will play knight a3, trying to defend the pawn that way, because that looks like a normal way to defend it, but that is actually a blunder. And what they overlooked here is that you've got this long-range move, bishop takes a3, eliminating the defender, and after this exchange, now bishop b4, bishop takes a3, and after this exchange you execute your main threat, knight takes c2, check to the king, and you grab the rook on the next move. Let's say your opponent is smart enough to notice this, and he plays the move bishop b3, defending the pawn that way. In this case, we've got one more trick, and notice that you keep punching here, not letting your opponent to catch his breath. Now with the move pawn to d5, you're threatening this pawn once again. And if they capture on d5, you just recapture, pretending like you just blundered this knight. And your opponent will probably notice that, hey, I can grab it. That's the most played move in this position, but then this fails to knight to c2. We deflected the bishop from b3, and therefore this pawn on c2 is no longer defended. You just win the pawn, then you win the rook on the next move, you got material advantage, which is enough to win. And of course, you nullified white's attacking attempt whatsoever. Now, generally, this is end of story. That is it. That's why I said that it's much easier for you to remember. But just to illustrate what could possibly happen after that, let me continue the variation for a couple more moves just to show you. You don't have to remember it, it's just an example so that you see what you can do next. Now, your opponent will need to move his king from check, so king d2, knight takes a1, and you got the material advantage, which is probably enough to win. Now, the only hope of white is try to capture this knight, which is in the corner of the board. So they might play bishop b3, aiming for, going bishop b2 and capturing the knight that way. But they're out of time, because you develop your attack a lot faster, and white's king is centralized, is also overexposed. So what you do here is you first attack it with bishop b4 check, and after they cover it, you play bishop f5, taking aim at this pawn. And now all you want is just to bring your rook to d8, either just by playing it so, or by castling queenside. And once your rook is on d8, it starts putting a lot of pressure against these squares, and that's how you win. For example, if they go bishop b2, desperately trying to get your knight, you can just castle queenside, and now rook takes d5 is the real threat. Notice that this knight is pinned down to the king, therefore it not really defends the bishop. The knight cannot move, so rook takes d5 is coming. What can they do now? They also have to cover this weakness on d3, which is also under your massive fire. Your rook x-rays it from here. If they try bishop e4, that fails in a pretty funny way. You just take it. And it turns out that, although there is this pawn and there is this knight, they can't just do anything. The pawn is pinned down to the king just as well as the knight. So they just lost their bishop for nothing here on e4. Now, what if instead your opponent is really smart, really stubborn? He goes bishop c4 and protects the pawn that way so that you can't just win it. Then you play c6, aiming for b5, and you just want to push this bishop away and then play rook takes d3 anyway, which will completely destroy white and attack all around. And yeah, basically that's how you win. By the way, let's this also be a little quiz. What if your opponent goes pawn a4, trying to stop you from b5? And his plan is still the same. He wants to go, for example, knight e2 and capture the knight this way, or even just to capture the knight on the next move with their dark square bishop. Can you find the way out for you? If so, write it down in the comments below. Alright, and now let me cover a couple of what ifs. What if your opponent uses another move order or does not accept your sacrifice? So let's say your opponent starts with queen h5 here, trying to put some pressure here and threatening your opponent. Initially, you just go knight c6, as always, simply protecting this pawn on e5. As they go bishop c4, aiming to checkmate you, you definitely need to stop that, so you play pawn g6, pushing this queen away. And as it goes back to f3, that's the position that we want. From here, you can play queen f6 and offer this exchange of queens. Now, what if they don't take there? I mean, generally speaking, you wish them to take, because that helps you to develop your knight. But if they don't, you can force that by going knight to d4 on the next move anyway, and that would attack this queen, forcing it to go anyway. Plus the knight from d4 would hit this pawn on c2. So knight d4 could just force that exchange anyway. And usually they will take here. Now knight takes f6, this hits this pawn on e4, therefore white needs to defend it. So let's say they go d3, now we go knight to d4. You see that we play the exact same moves, even though, like, unlike the previous variation, we got this pawn on g6, not on g7, that doesn't matter, right? You just play all the same stuff. Now here we know that they gotta defend this pawn. If they play bishop b3, we play d5, all the same stuff, hitting this pawn on e4. The bishop has to guard the pawn, it can't move away, therefore if they take, you recapture. Now we already know that if they're seduced by this knight sack, you play knight takes c2, you win the rook. What if they don't take? In most cases, they'll try to play c3, kicking away your active knight from d4. And then you can obviously trade off this active bishop. And then if you look at this position after, let's say, bishop f5, white is left over with just weaknesses. His position is completely passive. He's got nothing to do here. This bishop on d3 is handing your hand development, and you have a pretty big advantage. They'll probably go d4 just to not let you capture this pawn. Now after an exchange, he's got a bunch of pawn weaknesses here that you can attack later. Plus you can go knight b4, threatening knight c2, forking the king and the rook, or knight d3, attacking that way. This pawn on d4 is weak, just like all the other pawns, and therefore you have a winning attack anyway. Besides that, guys, I've got great news. I have just launched the course Level Up Your Chess that I've been working on over the last several months. And this course delivers just what it promises. It brings your chess to the next level and helps you to achieve your chess goals. What I did to develop this course was I analyzed the progress of my various students and I checked what are the things that triggered their jump to the next level. And I summarized it in a single course. So what it does for you is, here's my bold promise. It contains 6 chapters. And if you study just one of them, that would be enough to bring your chess to the next level. I'm so confident. Within this course, for the first time, I recorded my games live, showing you exactly how I think while playing chess and how I apply the principles that I teach so that you can model my thinking process and play like a GM, basically, okay? And because we're celebrating the launch, you can now get it for the next couple of days with a 50% discount. You can get another course, Calculate Till Mate, which is worth $100. You'll get it for free. So if you're interested, click the link below the video in the description and join us right now. I'll see you on the inside. Take care. Bye-bye.